Hi everybody, my name is Hannah and this is Pepper and Pine, and today I want to share with you the books and resources I'm using to put together a unit on horses. Now this turned out to be a lot more involved than I expected. We're bringing in history and science and literature and lots of hands-on projects if possible into this unit, so it's really blossomed into quite a lengthy and rich unit. So bear with me as I share with you all of these resources. And I want to explain to you also how I put together our units and why I'm choosing the materials that I am using for this unit. I do love picture books. I love games. I love any kind of art and projects that can be incorporated into a unit. I feel like that really leaves a lasting impression for the children and helps connect what they've learned with something that's hands-on. So the first book I want to show you is Sergeant Reckless. And by the way, these books are in no particular order. They are just all over my table here, and so I don't really have them grouped together, but I do want to share with you whether they are as a picture book, a history book, or any other kind of book. So this is the true story of the little horse who became a hero, and I look at these illustrations, absolutely gorgeous and breathtaking. I do choose a lot of our picture books based on the illustrations. I feel like even if the story isn't that great, at least the children are looking at like some magnificent artwork, and you can always just make up your own story if you wanted to. And these illustrations do not disappoint. They are absolutely breathtaking. So I love adding history into a unit that isn't a historical unit. And horses, initially it was because my daughter took some horseback riding lessons and became interested in them. And so adding something in that can work with my other units or can have a historical angle to them, or that can also be of interest to my 13-year-old son, is what I look for when putting together the unit. It's not only just for one child. I keep in mind all of the other students who are going to be participating, and that way I have a nice variety. All right, so I think both of my children are going to really enjoy this book as well as some of the other ones, and a lot of this stuff is new to me too. So I know very little about horses in general, and so I'm actually really excited to learn myself. Pony book. This is a DK book, and I do believe I got this one from the library bookstore for really inexpensive, but I do have to say that some of the images are they look a little bit dated, but that totally doesn't matter. I'm glad to have a book that has photographs. I do prefer illustrations for a lot of my books, and having some books that just have the photographs, it's going to help, especially for a unit like this, so that you can really get a good feel of what you're learning about, or the different horses and the different things that they need, rather than just looking at an illustrated picture book. So this is not what I would picture as a really engaging book unless you're super into horses. And so this is the kind of book that I would just read a little bit now and then, but kind of break it up with some of the other more engaging books, just because I don't think that my kids would sit through several pages of this. But you might have a child that's really into a particular unit, and this book will just be something that they just soak up really well. In general, I've moved away from the DK books just because they felt a little bit dry to me, but they are a great resource as far as information. Professor Noggins has a game on horses, and I was super excited to add this to our unit. We love the Professor Noggins games. They are a trivia-based card game. They are nice and thick. They're really good quality. They come with an illustration on one side and then two sets of questions on the back side, an easy set and a hard set. And we love playing this game throughout the unit and even beyond our units. We start out with the easy questions, and usually if we don't know anything about the unit, we can't get any of these questions right. But what ends up happening is that as we proceed through our unit and we read our other books, then we become more knowledgeable and we can answer the easy ones. And by the end of the unit, we like to challenge ourselves with the hard ones. Now, if I am more familiar with the subject area, sometimes I will do the hard ones while the children do the easy ones. But I'll tell you, these days, we're kind of like on an even playing field. Okay, so it also comes with the dice, and then you can roll it to see which question number you get. But a lot of times the way we'll play is that we'll just omit playing with the dice, and we'll just go we'll just pick a card, and whoever's turn it is, we'll just start with the first question and second question and so on. And that makes it a little bit easier since we don't play this play all the cards always in one sitting. Sometimes we will do this as our opening activity for a unit. We might play 10 or 15 cards, and it's just easier for us to keep track that way if we're just starting with question number 1 and then moving through. All right, we also have another book that has a historical angle. This is Amazing True Horse Stories, Galloping Through History. And I really can't tell you much about this book yet, but do check back at the end of this unit after all of the projects have been done and our unit is done. Then I will share with you a review of all of the materials that we used and tell you what we liked and what we didn't like and what I definitely recommend. I'm happy to include a book like this because it's really different from what you would maybe typically think of as a horse unit. However, looking through this, I do feel like maybe this might be a little bit heavier of a book in that it might not be quite as story driven or engaging, but I can't tell you for sure since we haven't gone through it, and this is just my first impression by looking at the pictures. But I am really happy to have something like this because oftentimes a book like this, which has a lot of different stories or maybe a lot of different biographies, what that does for me in particular is that we will go through it and we might not be drawn to every single story, but there'll definitely be at least one story or one person who we are more attached to or engaged with that we want to learn more about, and that often then can continue the learning with a new book or a new unit based on that particular story. It also gives a nice framework for where things fit in history or different biographies that where you might just learn about one person in passing, but then when you dive deeper you realize how rich their story is and how well connected it is with other parts of history at that time or science or literature, whatever subject it is that you are studying. So I really do like books that have a lot of different variety in them. However, I find them a little bit harder to get really engaged with. However, they are great for just doing one story at a time interspersed with the other material that you might have for a unit study. Fritz and the Beautiful Horses. Again, I love adding picture books into our units. I find them to be really educational, very informative. They are usually super gorgeous because of the illustrations, and I find this to be a great way to kind of bring us together. When you're looking at a picture book, you're going to draw your students in near to you, or they might be sitting in front of you and you can hold up the book, but I find it to be a really connecting lesson that you can do with multiple students and even multiple grades, especially multiple grades. I find that the older children might not be as interested in sitting down with you with a picture book, but in my case, because I have multiple ages in our homeschool, I find that my older children still really love listening and looking at the picture books while I'm reading it to the younger students. Horses. I did need to choose a few books that were nonfiction, just really informative, just basic knowledge about horses, and I did choose a few of them. And one thing that I found challenging in choosing books is that oftentimes you can't really get a good look at the size of the book, the feel of the book, the content, the pictures, the illustrations, and so I do have a lot of books that are repetitive or redundant because I wasn't sure how they were going to work out. And so this has its pros and cons. Sometimes it's great to get a variety, then you can revisit that information as you're doing the unit so that as you come across information that's familiar, you might, do a little trivia with your children, or it's just exciting to know that you already know it. However, in one of our previous units, we found that it was too much and it got a little bit too laborious reading through the same information over and over again, even though the books were super gorgeous. So I just want to be mindful not to have an overload of similar topic books. That wasn't a word, topic. But anyway, I don't want to have too many things that are too similar, but you'll know better at the end of this unit what things really worked out and what nonfiction books are going to be ones that I recommend. Okay, so let me save this for a minute and show you this book called Album of Horses. This is a really beautifully illustrated picture book. Or actually just book. Fantastic illustrations. I love all the other little illustrations within the chapter. I do confess that we've actually already started reading this book and it is superb. It is awesome. I love it. It is story driven. Each chapter draws you in immediately. It takes you through understanding these different horse breeds in a way that is just magical and enchanting. I love it. It really gets to your heart. These stories, you want to know what's going to happen. You stay engaged the whole time. I have nothing negative to say about this book. I highly recommend it. And I will say that also at the end of this unit, I'm sure, even though we've only just begun this book, a really awesome book so far. Okay, I have one more book to show you that we've actually already started, actually maybe a couple of books. So I confess that we were really inspired to start this unit before I actually put this unit fully together and figured out what books we're going to read and when we're going to read them and how we're going to do our projects. We just kind of dove in out of sheer excitement. So The Equine Legacy, I was really excited about this book. It's how horses, mules, and donkeys shaped America. And I thought this would be really fabulous for an American history unit, and of course a unit on horses, and just how important these animals were to every aspect of a developing nation. And I have already started reading this book with my children. This is definitely not for a young student. Well, in the sense that it's quite dry. But my 13-year-old and I are getting value. I'm getting a tremendous amount of value. He's kind of just tolerating the book. And my daughter is still within the vicinity listening because this is a unit for her. But this book has been so informative so far, and I've really enjoyed it. And it's brought in so many different references and even poems. And I have thoroughly enjoyed the poems about horses and how valued they were. So I am super excited to have this book. It did win the San Diego Book Award for 2017, and I'm really eager to continue reading it. Although I don't think my kids will probably last the whole entire book. Okay, so we have again, an assortment of books when it comes to any unit, and this one is H for Horse. This is coloring, sticker, and activity book. Now, none of my children actually were really into coloring books, so I was a little bit hesitant about adding this one in, but I decided to go ahead and do it anyway because it did have other things that were in here that I thought my daughter might like, but it is really juvenile, and I don't think for an 8-year-old this will be as interesting as it could have been for a younger student or someone who is really into coloring. So I don't know how much value she's going to get out of this book. I think the stickers in the back are really nice too, but actually she's not that much into stickers either. So this might not be a huge hit, but I still wanted to show it to you, and I could be totally wrong. She might really enjoy it. But if you have a child that's really into coloring, then this might be a nice book. Plus it goes through the alphabet and has different things that start with that letter that pertain to horses. The Elemental Horse, the Elemental Horses, 12 Things to Remember. I actually saw this at a local coffee shop, and I do believe that the author is local to Southern California where we live. So I was really happy to support this author, and plus it fits perfectly with our unit, both from a historical point of view as well as for this unit on horses, because our units are never just without taking into consideration the other units that we're doing throughout the year or even years. So I want to backtrack for 1 minute and go back to this book and say that we already have done an American history unit. You know, we've been homeschooling for many years, so we've actually circled through a lot of these units multiple times. But this book is also going to make a great reference for when we do go back to our American history unit, since it has to do with how these animals shaped America, so that when we are talking about, say, the Oregon Trail, for instance, or the Western movement, and we are talking about the importance, we'll understand better the importance of horses that way. So I'm happy for a book that can service multiple units, and this one does the same as well. This one goes through these different horses with the Chinese character drawn within the horse. It explains that horse, the characteristics, talks about the symbol. And so this is going to help us with our Silk Route or Silk Road unit, which is also scheduled for this year. So a book like this, again, services more than one unit, so that really delights me. Plus, it's a really beautiful picture book. and really informative. And really, I bought it because it was from a local author, but then of course it works really well for us. But I would have purchased it anyway to support our local authors. But then I was really delighted that we found a way to use it within our units. A Field Full of Horses. Did I already start reading this to the kids? I believe I did. Actually, I did read this to the kids. It's a really beautifully illustrated picture book that goes through some aspects of horses, like really, really basic things regarding horses. And I really enjoyed reading this book. I actually learned a lot since I know nothing about horses, even some of the basic things that a horse enthusiast would know right away. But for those of you who don't, or who just want a really beautiful picture book, this is nice. It's not story driven, but it's so easy to read and it keeps you engaged, and so I really like it. I didn't realize that this was part of a whole series of books, and I saw that at the back of the book it has these other ones that I do think we have a few of them already, but now this is going to inspire me to add more of these books into our homeschool library just because we enjoyed this one so much. My Pony by Susan Jeffers. This book was cute. I can't say that I super loved it or that there was anything particularly lacking in it. The illustrations are really beautiful, but they're not exactly the kind of illustrations that I super love, but they are so intricate and so well done. The story is somewhat based on the author's desire to have horses when she was young, and how she couldn't have horses for the expense and no place to put them, and so she ended up drawing all her fantasy horses and became an illustrator because of it, and that kind of fed her need and desire and love for horses. And so it's a really beautiful story when you know the backstory, and it's here in the back of the book, which I really, really appreciate. I love when authors add an extra note about why they wrote the book or something about their personal history that inspired the book. I feel like it makes the book that much more rich, and so for that reason I would recommend this book. So there are a few books in here that we've already read, so I apologize for this being kind of all over the place, because had I just looked at this to begin with, I would have just said that I am purchasing these books, the picture books, so that we have a variety of books within our unit, and I love adding picture books into our unit. I look for them whenever I can. I don't think we have a single unit that doesn't have a rich assortment of picture books. I find them to be really educational. I find them for information like biographies or other historical events, or for science. I find picture books to be a great way to introduce a topic, not just to children, but to adults as well, because we could always use a refresher. There could be things that we don't know, and I find that picture books are a really gentle way to expose us to information that we might not already know. Horses in Battle. Again, this is a coloring book, and I have other books in this series in our homeschool library, and we rarely use them as coloring books. In fact, we don't ever at all. My children are not really into that, so we don't end up coloring them in. However, I did buy it for the content, and then if they do desire to color them in, they certainly can. So this book goes through battles from ancient Egypt all the way up until World War II, and it talks about the horses in those battles and how they were used, or the army, the military people, and how they use them. But it's specifically about the battles and of course about history and horses. I did enjoy this one. However, because I was purchasing it for the content, I found that the content was just not even a highlight. It was like so minimal, which of course it's going to be for a book like this. However, this then is inspiring to go look for more information on any particular topic that you found interesting within the book. So I didn't find the ancient historical battles with horses as interesting as the more recent use of horses in World War I and World War II, when you start having the introduction of machines along with, that transition. That transition was more interesting to me. So for me, this would inspire me to look for more books on this time period and include this with our history units on modern history or World War I or World War II. All right, so let's go through a few more books here. We have Death of the Iron Horse. And this is a picture book, and I know little about it except that the Iron Horse is supposed to be a train, but it says the death of the Iron Horse versus the death of the horse. So anyway, I am assuming it has to do with, again, that transition, which those seem to be really interesting to me. And I will be able to tell you more about this during our review video. Horses, this is was it just a picture book or is it a nonfiction book? Now I don't remember, but you can see that the illustrations are really beautiful. I do believe that there are books that are going to be really informative, but they're still going to be story driven, and I feel like this is one of those books. And again, adding picture books into our unit while we're reading some of the heavier topics allows us to kind of break from that. So right now we might read a chapter from Equine, what is that book called? Equine Legacy, for instance. And then we'll break it up with a picture book like this, and then we might go back and read something like this, and then we might finish it off with a novel or a fiction book. And that's some a typical way that we might approach reading our books for our unit. For a unit like this, we will have minimal writing, especially for my 8-year-old. A lot of it will just be the way that we will talk about, or the way that we'll learn about the information is through discussion and through hands-on projects and a lot of drawing and maybe a little bit of writing, but it's not going to be writing heavy. Pocket Genius Horses. I didn't realize this book was so tiny, but it is the pocket edition, and it goes through all these different horses. And if you were a horse enthusiast, you would probably love going through all of these, but I don't know how much my daughter is going to enjoy going through this book, so I'll have to let you know at the end of this unit. Favorite horses, stickers. I again thought that she would enjoy this. I'm looking for a variety of things again for the unit, and she's not that into stickers, so I'm not actually sure this is going to go very far for her, but it does have all the different names of these different breeds, and it is nice to have. Who Was Seabiscuit? I really like this series of books. I find them to be really easy to read. The illustrations are all they look like pencil drawings. They're just black and white except for the cover. And this is a really quick read. I find them to be really good biographies. And whenever we can, I add them into our units. I prefer to read these aloud to my children, but sometimes when I don't quite have enough time, we buy a lot of books. So if I'm not going to have enough time to read all the books to my kids, these are definitely ones that I will assign to my children to read on their own, because it's super easy to read. They can read it in no time. And that way I can read aloud the picture books and some of the heavier books that I don't think that they'll enjoy reading on their own. Okay, growing up in Wild Horse Canyon. This has to do with looking at a huge period of time in the same area and looking at different events that happen, and of course it all centers around horses. And I started reading this book to my children, and it was interesting, but not as captivating as I hope, but still I think this is a great addition for our unit. The illustrations are really beautiful, and it goes through different periods of time, but very briefly, and it says something that happens, and then 5 years later, 10 years later, 2 years later, it talks about something else that happens in that same area. So it's going to take us through, I think, 100, 200 years time span in the same area, and different things that occurred in that area, and of course, again, all centered around horses. Okay, we have several more things still to show you, as well as all of our projects. This book is called Wild Blue, the story of Mustang Appaloosa, and it came with, this toy horse that came with the book. So it was like a whole kit, and I was very hopeful about this, but some of the reviews online were not super favorable about the book. So I am a little disappointed, but I'm still going to read it aloud to my daughter. This makes I'm hoping a great kind of evening bedtime read aloud, totally story driven, hopefully super engaging. And then it comes with the horse that she can use for pretend play. So I will be able to let you know more about that book once we've read it. The Perfect Horse, The Daring Rescue of Horses Kidnapped During World War II. Oh my goodness, this sounds super interesting to me. Kidnapped horses, World War II. So this again, I think would work really great for a history unit. While I was looking for books, and the way I looked for books this time, or really for all of our materials, is that I just went into Amazon and I put in horses, and then I just kind of narrowed down my search for books and then kits. And any of the books that came up that looked interesting, had an interesting title, were beautifully illustrated, I went ahead and I added to my cart, and I got carried away, obviously. But I am really, really excited about this book. I'm hoping to do this as a read aloud for my children, but if not, then I will assign this to my 13-year-old to read. I did keep him in mind as I was putting together this unit so that I could have things that would also interest him, so it wasn't too young or juvenile or just had picture books. I wanted something that was going to be a little bit more rich and full for this unit. And so this book I have really high hopes for, and I do want this to be a read aloud, but we obviously have a lot of things to get through. And so if we don't get this as a read aloud, I'll definitely assign it to my 12-year-old son, or 13-year-old son. He's 13 now. The Winter Horses. This is also this was from the New York Times best-selling author, so I'm hoping that it's going to be captivating and interesting. This also has to do with World War II, and I love that we can add in some history books into our horse unit, and I will, of course, be able to tell you more about this one once we're done reading it at the end of this unit. Okay, so we have another history-inspired project here. This is the Trojan horse, and this is a working recreation of the ancient Greek Trojan horse. So again, this would go really great with a Greek unit, and of course we're using it with our horse unit, and this is going to be something that my 13-year-old puts together. My 8-year-old daughter, like, you might have an 8-year-old that's super into constructing these things. She's kind of borderline into it, kind of not quite capable of doing some of the more intricate projects, so this is definitely something for my 13-year-old, since the other projects I have are a little bit more youthful and they're for my 8-year-old. We have the last stack of books here and then the projects. Horses of Long Ago. So we have another history-inspired book here. This one has some illustrations that at first glance totally weren't my type of illustrations, but I really, really have grown to like them. I think they work with the book really, really well. So this goes through horses from ancient times all the way up to, let's see how, up to the 1900s. And again, a great way to add a book that has a historical take on it. And what you could do if you were studying a particular time in history, you might use this book just to cover that time period rather than reading it from cover to cover. I hope to read this cover to cover, however, for this horse unit, and then hopefully I remember to include this with those different history units as we come upon them, so that I can add this into our history units. The Everything Book of Horses and Ponies. I did get a number of nonfiction, just kind of dry science books to add to this unit, just so that we could get just a good understanding of horses, their anatomy, other things about their care, things like that. So this book does seem really young, but I think that it will fit really well with my 8-year-old. What I've noticed about some of the books is that sometimes when there's just a lot of information the way this book has about each of these different breeds, that for us it's a little bit easier just to have them in bite-sized quantities and maybe just read one horse a day throughout this unit. Otherwise, we start to get really confused about the different horses that we read and different information about them. And so this is something that I doubt we'll read cover to cover. This is by National Geographic Kids, Ponies, and Horses. This is a sticker activity book. I do believe my daughter has already started playing with this one and working through this one. I do believe this one was a gift to her, which was perfect for this unit. And this one's a lot of fun, and I'm sure that you could learn a lot with it, but this is something that I would just hand over to the child, the student, my own daughter, and let them just play with it and enjoy it as part of the unit. I don't see myself really going through that book with her at all. So this is another of the Dover coloring books. This is the Wonderful World of Horses coloring book. I do believe this was a gift that my daughter received, which again works perfectly with our unit. She did start to color a little bit, but again, she probably won't color through this that much, but we still will include it in our unit and have it there so that sometimes when I'm reading, she could do something that's a little bit, uses her hands and kind of engages her in a different way if she doesn't want to listen to some of the books that don't have any pictures. Our Amazing World Horses, again, another nonfiction book that's just going to go through horses, information about them. This one seems short enough that we could probably do it in one sitting and not be too overloaded with information. Plus, it comes with photographs versus illustrations, which my books tend to be heavier on the illustrations versus the photographs. I do prefer illustrations over photographs, but it's really important to have a balance of it when you're doing a book or a unit that's going to have scientific references. I think that having photographs is going to be important. More than 100 stickers inside. I Love Horses activity book. I do believe this was also another gift that my daughter received, and both of my children have actually used this book extensively with the beginning parts of this book where it teaches you how to draw horses. Both of my kids have really enjoyed this. So my daughter has used the book to learn how to draw the horses, and she will just have them just on a white sheet of paper. She will draw the horses, and then she'll hand them over to me after she colors in the horses, and I'll do the background and the rest of the scenery. And it's just a great way to do something together, an activity that's connecting, and also she's just really enjoying learning how to draw these horses. And again, this is something that she's doing while I'm reading through our enormous stack of books. So let me take these all aside here and just show you how many books and projects we have planned for this unit. So there are quite a few, but now I want to show you just a few more things that we have for this unit that are going to be our projects or our activities. So let me clear this off and get these other things to show you. So the first things I want to show you are the activities or the projects that we have that are artistic. So we have 2 kits here. My Dream Horse kit comes with 3. It's a horse family, as well as the paints in order to paint these horses. And then this one, My Dream Horse, comes with 2 horses. I think they're a little bit more equal sized, as well as information and the paints. So I will have hopefully some tutorial videos or some project videos on the things that we're doing, so you can check that playlist. That link is down in the description box below. So we probably won't have a tremendous amount of projects for this unit. However, the ones that we do, you'll be able to find them on that playlist. I also want to show you this 4D Vision horse. This oh, there we go. We got all the parts that go with it. I did keep the box so that I could show you, and we can also kind of keep it for storage, but it is quite large, and this is all that comes in it. It's just these things here. Okay, so it's going to go through all the different parts, the anatomy of a horse, and what's really cool is that you can take it apart and then reassemble it, and my kids have already done that. Let me just take it apart really carefully so that you can kind of see the inside, which you can see through this, but well, I don't know how they assembled it, and I don't want to snap it in the wrong way if I'm not taking it out properly. So I'm actually not going to do that. There are some more pieces inside. Again, something that's going to be more scientific for our unit, and that's why I got this for the unit. It looked really interesting to me, and also I love that you can kind of see through it and kind of assemble it out, all the different parts of the horse. We also have, lastly, a couple of toys to go along with our unit. I already showed you this one, but my daughter did receive this horse as a gift, and I think we bought this one for her. And this is to encourage pretend play for this unit. I find that this is a great activity to engage children in while we are doing a lot of the read alouds, and that way it's something that can keep their hands busy if they are kinesthetic learners and they kind of need to just keep their hands busy while a lesson is going on. Having something that kind of relates to the lesson is going to be a good idea. But you know your child best. Some children get really distracted by play and then they stop listening. I have one child like that, and so you just kind of have to judge to see whether your child is going to be able to listen, it's going to enhance their learning, or whether play is actually going to detract them and distract them from their learning. So the only other thing that I want to show you that actually I think came with some of these smaller horses is a barn. And this was something that my daughter spent her money on in order to buy. And I can't really show you the whole thing really well here, but I will remove the top part on this. Let me just move it this way. I'll remove the top part here and see if you can get a better look inside. So they have the horse stables, and each of these barn doors can open and close. It came with a lot of just horse pieces to go along with that toy, as well as some other things here that have all gotten mixed up with some of the other toys. Anyway, my daughter really enjoys playing with that. She likes to set it all up along with some of her other toys, and it's just a really great way to engage learning on a hands-on level. So if you were ever apprehensive about adding in what seems like just toys into a unit, then I highly encourage you to try it, because it really helps bring that learning alive. You'll find that the children will use terminology or stories or pretend play that relate to what they've learned, and it's a really wonderful way to see that learning kind of come alive. Don't forget to check out the blog post that accompanies this video. You can find that link down in the description box below. I have more tutorials and pictures and links to the products that we have used for this unit. Don't forget to head over to my website at pepperandpine.com for more information on this unit, as well as all the other homeschool units that we have done.